If you want, you can like put it up on something like this and have it tilt down so that it kind of sees everything.
Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, so you might want to take a photograph of all of this material at some point before we get started, just so you know what you're gonna need to kind of get started here. So I like to lay everything out just in the beginning, that way you guys can take a photo, and this is everything that you're going to need for your first etch. Okay, so rosin talc, a bowl of water, cold water always with litho, a gum arabic in 2 containers, a squirt bottle is handy, 3 glass bowls, nitric acid, an ounce measurement, goggles and gloves for handling the nitric acid, the eyedropper, and a sumi brush. Most of the material is back here. What's going on? And there's also, this is kind of your go-to reference if you need like a quick reference. You know, check this. This has a little checklist on it, and you know, we're gonna check the first etch right here. And I just want to double check my materials. 2 bowls, water. We use 1, that's fine. 3 glass bowls, gum arabic, nitric acid and dropper, ounce measuring cup, 3 pads for cheesecloth. Okay, that we don't have. Rosin and talc, and goggles, glove, 2 sponges. So we need cheesecloth. And that is in the Abushan hardware thingy. No, bring the whole bucket. Okay, that's good. And so this is cheesecloth. It's not tarlatan. You've seen tarlatan in Italia, right? This is different. This doesn't have the starch in it. So we want at least 3 nice pads. And you take your cheesecloth and you try to find a nice spot on it that doesn't have any holes. And you just fold everything in. Nice firm pad. These ones aren't as good when they're separated like that. So I usually try to just find ones. Maybe I'll use this kind of for the core of it, and then take one of these ones that have a tighter stitch. Yeah.
I feel that.
I don't know. Who knows? Life gives you a bunch of stuff. Just do it.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself. Ain't nothing to it but to do it.
There's 3. Okay. So I need to determine my etch strengths. So we talked about how the litho crayons that we use have grease content in them. So using, and then we have tush washes too. So they all kind of have a different amount of grease in them. And I also draw with different variations of, densities of value. And so I need to determine how strong my etches need to be able to successfully etch the stone. If it's too weak, then I'll lose information. If it's too weak in darker areas, it'll go darker. It'll want to go darker. If it's too strong, then I'll lose areas of delicate drawing and also delicate areas of tush wash. So it's tough to get it right, but it's easy to get it pretty much right in the middle, right? But it's when you have real extremes that your etches become difficult. Like if Charlie's doing a lot of scraping, that's hard to etch. Because if you go too hot, then you're not going to be able to get a nice dense black in your prints. But if you go too weak, with all that scraping, there's a lot of residual grease, and the lines will fill in.
24 hours.
So
It could be-
you have to do it really hot
It could be where it's
I
not-
know.
for a short amount of time.
I don't wash my hair once a day, it's so disgusting and
We'll
greasy.
get into it a little bit.
Burning out.
Does dry
Over
shampoo-
here, there's an etch table.
I
This is a Kissler etch table. I don't really prefer this one. It's too,
Like, I'm gonna be honest, they had
I don't know, it's
stuff
too,
that I didn't
it's
necessarily
overcomplicated. It doesn't need to be that complicated.
Yeah, it real stuff.
I prefer this
Yeah,
general
exactly.
etch
Like, I
table
had an
first
issue
though.
where they were like,
So if you look at this,
it was about the chest and stuff, and they're like,
this is
no,
where my
don't
drawing
give
materials
a
are.
lot. Why don't we send you
So it's kind of like a
something
graph, right?
fine?
So
But
drawing materials are over
they're
here,
like, if they-
and then type of stone I have.
they recommend it
So
to do it.
white stone, yellow stone,
Rolling things out.
yellow stone to gray stone, and then gray stone. So the first thing I need to figure out is what color is my stone.
So I was having a.
And I'm gonna say it's a yellow gray stone.
Done ultrasound in my breast, looking for something
Yours
completely
is gonna be
different.
probably a
And I
yellow
found
gray stone
something
too.
that completely
And
unrelated.
then yours is a
And now I
gray
have to
stone,
get
I think.
An ultrasound of my breast.
Looks kind of gray
Every
from here.
6 months.
You can tell a white stone is really white. A yellow stone is pretty yellow. It's hard to tell between yellow and gray stones sometimes. And that just is based, that's the density of the stone itself. So
It is.
harder stones can get more detail because you can get a finer
Keep scheduling.
grain on it, but it also withstands the corrosive effects of nitric acid better too. So that's why we get different etches and different kind of detail. All right, so I'm gonna go with the yellow gray.
Me too.
And I didn't do any tush wash, so that's kind of nice. I didn't do a lot of heavy scraping, that's kind of nice too. Usually I overdo it. So I'm looking, I did most of my drawing with a number 3 crayon. And so this is actually the easiest I've ever had to use this table. Usually I've got like tush wash, and then I'll have to look up tush wash, stick dissolved in lithotripsine, rubbing crayon, autographic ink, tush washes, and you want to use all of your drawing materials and then refer to it over here. So Yellowstone, number 3 crayon. So here's my times. With a light drawing, I'm going to do number 3, or 3 drops of acid. So these numbers are drops of acid per ounce of gum arabic.
No, I'm like, you have a number.
And my strongest etch is going to be a 10 to 12 drop. So does that make sense? Does that make sense? So depending on the drawing material that you're using, if you have a lot of like, say you do a lot of number 1 crayon, you're going to look over, just follow this over to whichever stone it is that you're using, and say 10 for medium density drawing, for my medium heavy drawing. So that would be like my medium. This would be my heavy drawing. These would be my delicates. So you just want to look at your image and kind of figure out what your etches are going to be first. Typically you do 3, a light, a medium, and a heavy. Make sense?
So you're painting the different strengths of acid onto the specific areas
Yep.
that are needed
Yep.
based on what you drew where. Okay.
Yep, so we've got gum arabic, and this is an aqueous solution. So this is water loving. It bonds with the calcium of the stone and makes a very strong layer of non-image area that attracts water. It remains aqueous when I'm printing, and that's like the big thing. We need the stone to reject ink in the non-image areas. So this is going to be mixed with nitric acid. The nitric acid, you know, plays with the grease content of my drawing material and creates fatty acid deposits wherever my drawing is. And the non-image area bonds with the stone, the gum arabic bonds with the stone and creates adsorbed gum layer. So where there's drawing material, it becomes oleomanganate of lime. Where there's non-image area, it becomes an aqueous adsorbed gum layer. And that's about as technical as I get with it, because like it's just chemistry after that, right? You're dealing with chemistry, and you know, there's some carbon dioxide that's released, but I mean that's basically all you gotta know. Like we're just dealing with water and oil rejecting each other, and that's how we're gonna get our prints. Okay, so my etch strengths.
I just wish they had a soul box.
I'm gonna do like number 3 and number 5. So I usually just kind of find the lowest with my number 3 crayon. My lights, that's a 3 drop. So I'm gonna do a 3 drop for here because I used a number 3 for most of this stuff. I used the 5 and then I used the 3 over top. So I'm just going by number 3. So this will be 3 drops.
Of what?
My medium, I use mostly a number 3 crayon as well. That's gonna be 7. And then my heavy, where I used the 1 crayon in some of these areas, a little bit of rubbing crayon, but there is some delicate stuff in here too, is a 10 to 12 drop. So I'm gonna do a 3, a 6, and a 12.
I like what they have to say about mine, especially the
And usually,
neighborly, like I said.
this is much more delicate than I usually have. Crayon is really stable of a drawing material, so it's hard to mess this up. I could, in theory, just use gum arabic and just let it sit and replenish it over the course of like an hour, and the acidity that's just in this naturally would be enough to etch the stone if it was a nice stable crayon like this.
Yeah.
Some people do it differently. Some people will use a really hot etch and just put it on briefly and then take it off. But you know, I tend to play things a little bit safe and use etches that are a little bit weaker. Sometimes to my detriment. Take a look at like tush washes and stuff like that. Just take a look at it. Okay, so I'm gonna mix up my etches now that I know what they are. And remove my stone out of the way. So I got my 3 bowls. And so I'm using the small cup. And when I measure this, I want this all the way to the top.
That is smart. I was even thinking about it. I'm like, I know.
So let it kind of go
but I
over the
don't
edge.
wanna- It's not my stuff. I'm not gonna do it. My mouth hurts from talking.
Oh my goodness, that way.
I'm so happy that it hurts. It's fabulous.
Is that sarcasm?
No, I'm actually like I'm happy. Like I'm so you know when you smile and it
Oh,
hurts. I
yeah.
have that going on too. I'm just so happy. It's fabulous.
Those girls in the meeting are for like 2 different print exchanges,
Oh.
and one of them has to have the print there by like the beginning of April. I haven't started making the print.
I'm too nervous for that. I don't want to give people
So I'm gonna
like.
put this
I'm not
aside.
I don't want to give people crappy quality.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing it, so I'm so.
So I usually add my weakest etch first, and I go left to right. So weakest to strongest. And
Especially with small ones, you can turn them right back.
I'm gonna squeeze it out.
So when you start getting a portfolio together.
So you're gonna apply like this semester?
Oh yeah, I want to. Morgan's got me
So
excited.
this
Go on
dropper,
right now and do all the
Yeah.
fun shit.
usually
I would do that.
you can use this, but
It's so cool.
it hasn't been dropping predictably. So see that little groove right here? Right there. When you have this lightly rested, then the nitric acid can come up through capillary action and drop out. But it doesn't, I don't know, maybe there's an imperfection in the tip of this or something, but it like pours out. It doesn't drip out. So we started using this dropper. So I said 3 drops, that's per 1 ounce. If I had a big stone, that was like 3, there's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, go
Well, I mean,
7.
other than like your therapy
2,
minors,
3,
that's
4,
a different thing. Like that,
Could
it matters.
we have a
18,
bit of
14.
background in it too, so maybe like.
That's
if
supposed to be
you're
12.
Applying and you apply to do like, maybe let's say printmaking and then you decide to like do art history, maybe it helps.
And then just
Yeah,
get
to
the
have that on
extra
there.
out of there. I'm gonna clean that in the sink
So it shows that you're
afterwards.
competent in that area, or at least should be
So if I
competent.
accidentally put way too much in the first one, then I can make that my hot etch, right? And just try again on the second one.
Pretty cool.
Oh my god, look at my fingers from the tooth.
Once I'm done with that, I want to put it away. I don't want to leave it out. I'm gonna leave it out right now just so we don't keep doing this. But you know,
You know, like those paintings in black.
get it back in the cupboard as soon as you can. Typically.
Yeah.
I'm like, this would probably work better
Okay.
with oil paint. Just like-
So
The only
I got
issue
my
is
etches,
drying time
and I'm not gonna mess them up because I always keep the weakest on the left and my hottest on the right.
Even though it's like 10 days.
If I have a large stone like you, Colin, you're gonna want to double everything.
Probably
So
one
like,
of my favorite.
especially like if you have, it's all heavy and you need more of one
Oh, it's so
etch,
good.
you know what I mean? So just be aware of how much of each etch you're gonna need.
Double the gum arabic.
Yeah, and then double the drops of acid.
But it's the same proportion.
Probably
Yep.
every commission too, we're doing
So
people's
just double
like,
everything if you need to.
You don't want it, but it's so good.
Okay. So this is rosin and talc. I'm gonna start with my rosin.
I really am drawn to
And
the one rather than like the class room
what
that
this
one
does
vibe.
Totally.
So you can
is
tell
the
that
rosin
that
bonds
is
with
actually more of a
the
different-
drawing material,
Totally.
and it protects it from the nitric acid.
I really wish I got into like more science stuff and got.
It also dries ink, so if I'm doing my second etch and I've replaced the drawing material with ink,
I don't think
it'll still be wet, you know, but this rosin will essentially dry it.
But like,
And I just want to lightly go over it. I don't need a lot.
for the, like for stuff like I have.
So the main purpose of this is it protects
And that's more the kind of.
the drawing material from the corrosive effects of the nitric
Yeah,
acid.
Like, there's not much talk therapy you can
The
do
talc
about schizophrenia.
reduces surface tension. So
Also, I'm not liking antibiotics.
because I have greasy material that has oil in it,
Oh, yeah, that's completely bad.
and I have an aqueous solution, if I dip my brush in this and put it on here, what's it gonna
Beat
do?
up all over the place.
Yeah, and I won't be able to control, like say if I want my etch right in that area and nowhere else, if I didn't have the talc, it'll beat up and it won't, you know, go in those places that I want it to. And it might go into other places that I don't want it to. If you forget this, it's not the end of the world.
And that's it.
Okay. Now, this process
I do too.
is, people do this a little bit differently. I'm gonna check and see if that's looking at the stone. Okay, we might want to get a look at this. I'm gonna just point out, there's my weak, so that's my 3-drop etches in these more delicate areas. And here, my medium etch is 6 or 7 drops. That's gonna be kind of this stuff in here. And then my strongest etch is gonna be in some of these darker areas. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna start with my weak. And I started to say, this is where printmakers do things differently. Technically, what I probably should do is start with just straight gum arabic, put it on my stone, buff it down, and so I have like a nice buff down gum layer over the entire thing. And then I would apply my etches afterwards. It's more stable way to do things.
Like it made me
I'll cut
take
my
my
corner
own
here.
blood pressure. That's so stupid.
I kind of like to do all of my etches at once. So if this was like the Tamarind Institute, they'd be doing things much more methodical than we're doing.
Like all the other doctor's offices don't.
Stir up your etch. And you want to pool it on your stone. And I'm looking for a reaction. If I see a lot of bubbles, a lot of fizzing, that's telling me that my etch is too hot, too strong. If I don't see any bubbles at all, then there is a possibility that my etch is too weak.
Oh, so you can go over the other areas because it'll overlap.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I might allow some of my hot etch in here, right? And I might allow some of my medium etch in here. But what I want to be careful of is I don't want my hot etch in here.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if your light etch goes
No.
into the
My light etch, I could do my whole thing with my light etch, and that's
and then
typically
go over it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then buff it down. That's what I was saying. Like
Mm-hmm.
put
The
them
gum Arabic.
straight gum Arabic, and then do that step with each one of my etches. But I don't want to do that.
Do
But
you normally not do that?
I don't know.
Okay.
But don't tell any master printers that I don't, because I'll be the laughing stock of the print community. And so I'm not being like super careful with this. I just want this to pool. And this doesn't matter at all. I don't want the gum Arabic to dry. People, a lot of times people just take way too long doing this, right? You want to get it on there, and you want a fair amount on there. You want it pooled on. And then,
Is that a hair?
yeah, it's from this. It's from the brush. It's fine. So like some of these areas have been sanded or scraped out a little bit. So, you know, I might want to do my like medium etch in there. Borders, you typically want to use a hot edge because if there's residual gum, and you can see I sanded down my edges a little bit, and I've been resting my arm on it towards the end of my drawing. I want to use a hot edge because that will help remove, it'll burn out the residual grease from my hands and things like that on the border. So I'm going to switch to my medium. And so I'm not really looking for too much chemical reaction happening with my light etches because there's not a lot of nitric acid. There's not a lot of fatty materials. But I kind of want to see more of a reaction with this. And I'm just looking for bubbles. After a couple of minutes, I should see some bubbles where I've put this etch. And if there's not, then it's generally safe to add the hotter etch as well. And these are pretty weak for me, so this was 3, 7, and 12. Typically my etches are a little bit hotter, so like a 6, a 10, and an 18. So.
Do you normally do that because you have a lot of like
A lot more
some
heavy
light-
darks, yeah.
Okay.
My drawings are usually much darker than this.
Okay.
And they have a lot of revision, a lot of scraping and stuff. So I'm still not seeing a lot of action, but that's okay. I'm gonna put this, so my hot etch, I'm putting it in this medium area now, because I'm not seeing like a lot of bubbles. I am seeing some bubbling down here. If you wait a minute, like, and then I move right there, see how there's some bubbles coming up here now? It looks like a little bit of a froth that's on the surface
Okay.
when they build up. So you can see them starting to build up here. Look closely, Colin.
Okay. I didn't know if it was
Can you
bubbles
see
like
that?
these little ones.
No, it's these
But it's
teeny,
those,
teeny.
yeah.
Yeah, look closely when I move the brush. Can you see all these little tiny
Yeah.
bubbles?
Looks
Yep.
like soap on the surface.
Yeah, see, there's lots and lots of them.
Busy.
Yep. Now that's good. That's a good reaction. And see how it's starting to pool up more here? That's good. All that is good. I know that my etch was not too strong. If I see it and it's called flashing, when it goes like really frothy really quickly, then you want to cut it with just straight gum, and that's why I keep this handy. So if I think, okay, there's
like-
too much action going on,
Like your fire extinguisher.
yep, I'm gonna give it a little squirt, mix it around, just to kind of stop that action.
Too much action, like too much fizzing.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's maybe the nitric acid, the acidity is breaking down. It's overpowering the amount of greasy material I have.
So you seem like really unconcerned with where you're moving it around and how you're splashing it on. Is that
It does.
only because it's weaker? Like if
It-
it was stronger, you'd be more careful about how the
Yeah.
spots interact.
Yeah, and generally, generally I don't have a lot of delicate areas to worry about. Usually the thing that happens with my work is that it fills in. So the etches are too weak, and then my darks will want, where I scraped, it wants to fill in. But this is a real stable drawing. These etches are weak, just like you said, and so I'm not really concerned about it. And the acid does get weaker, so it spends itself and neutralizes itself as it's on the stone. So I'm gonna go back to my,
So is the purpose of this just to really differentiate your tones, like your light, medium, dark, like how thick or thin? I guess
it's just to, you basically want to match your drawing. So like the weak where the drawing is light, the strong where the drawing is darker.
Okay. So like as opposed to like if you were to draw something and only use one, like just one of them, to do all of it, would it all come out
You
like a
potentially
similar?
Yeah, I
like
probably
shade?
could have done this whole etch with like my 6-drop, if it was 6-drop and it wasn't, you know. I probably could have just done the whole thing, maybe added some straight gum arabic in the non-image areas, and then just do the whole thing with one etch and just leave it on for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And keep protecting these areas. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot of different ways to do this, a lot of different approaches. Like some people don't use nitric acid at all. And you generally want the whole process to last like 10 minutes. So
I have it all printed out in my head.
Is it kind of like aqua tinting, but like not
Like what?
really? Like aqua tinting, but like not really.
yeah, kind of.
Like the idea of having and like layering them.
And you can use the etches as a drawing medium too. So if I wanted to have my, say, you talked about having like a dark field, that Menin Noir, where you start with just a black. You can mix up a really hot etch, like 40, 50, 60 drops, and paint with that. And where you paint, it's going to be flashing. It's going to go white. And then you take your sponge and you just wipe it off, add some more, let it flash for a minute, wipe it off. And you can get these really painterly effects just by layering how much acid you put down, like really strong acid. And it'll make the blacks get lighter and lighter the longer the acid's on, the more times it's reapplied.
Cool.
It's a really beautiful effect.
That is so neat.
So I'm done. I don't need to do anything else. And it's been long enough. And so I'm going to buff my stone down. Sometimes if you have a lot of extra stuff, you might want to just take your sponge, wring it out as much as you can. I don't want water to be introduced. And then I would just lightly remove like just a little bit of the excess. But so we want nice buffed pads. And I'm kind of wiping inward towards the center of the stone to get off this excess. into my water. Take my next pad, big circles, fast. Make sure you get the edges.
I knew what was going on, but I still expected it to come off. I was still expecting the drawing to wipe away.
Oh, yeah. A little bit will. But it doesn't matter because now it's part of the stone.
Yeah.
Because we've changed now you can see a little bit. Tush wash will come off more, so don't be afraid of that. And sometimes your whole sections of tush wash will disappear and you'll be like, oh shit, what did I do? It doesn't matter. It's still there.
You won't see it, but it'll
You're just
print.
wiping the ink away.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're removing the pigment, you're not removing the grease. The grease is now bonded to the stone.
Yeah, that's kind of nuts.
So I want to let this sit overnight, at least 24 hours. And that's why we do this in kind of like 2-3 days, because it takes the second part. So that's the first etch. The second etch is going to be, we need to remove the drawing material and replace it with fresh ink. And so that once we have the fresh ink, then we're going to do the same thing one more time to reinforce the first etch. So that's called the second etch. So
With
we do
ink already on it?
Yeah. So we wash out the drawing material, we roll it up in fresh ink, and then we apply our second etch tomorrow or the next day or whenever.
Okay.
And that gets kind of fun, right? And the second etch is when you know if you fucked up on the first etch. Because it'll either be too dark or too light. And if it doesn't roll up, then you can make adjustments. So if it's too light, I can do a counter etch and resensitize my stone. Right now it's not sensitive at all. I can't add any new drawing material to this now. It won't take it because there's an adsorbed gum layer in the non-image areas.
And that will reject any grease that you put onto it.
Yep. Even if I etch it, it won't go back. It won't penetrate. Maybe some of it will if it's really heavy drawing. So if I needed to add more, I would need to resensitize it. It's pretty easy, but for the most part, I'm not too concerned about it. And I can talk about that later too, how you would do that. Any questions?
My brain hurts.
Once you just follow the steps, right? Just make sure that you follow the steps.
Yeah.
Determine etch strengths, apply rosin, apply talc, apply weakest etch as determined and continue with medium and hot etches. Remove excess with a cloth and apply fresh straight gum. We skip that, because I could have wiped all that and just put fresh gum down, but we don't have to do that. Buff down with cloth pads. Remove stone, wipe gum from surfaces. So if you had a lot of heavy gum Arabic, a lot of times it will drip down the side of the stone. You just want to move it and just make sure that there's not a lot of excess gum, especially underneath it. A small stone like this, it doesn't matter. A big stone like that, sometimes they become cemented to the press bed. And that's why we have a crowbar. Because we got to get under the corner and just pop it up. So.
Okay.
All right, let's go clean these up. I'm gonna stop this.
Wow.